Well, friends, more classified documents have been found at Mike Pence's home. What does all this mean for the prospects of Donald Trump being criminally indicted for his classified documents crimes? Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, it's another day. So of course there's another report of the search of the home of a high government official or a former high government official. This time we're back at Mike Pence's house. There's his humble abode there. So friends, let's try to answer one fundamental question. What do these searches of Joe Biden's home and Mike Pence's home, what do they mean for the prospect of Donald Trump being indicted for his classified documents crimes? Does it make it less likely that Trump will be indicted for his crimes, or does it make it more likely that he'll be indicted for his crimes? We're going to answer that question toward the end of this video, but let's start with the new reporting about yet another search of Mike Pence's home. This from Politico, headline, FBI searches Pence's home for classified materials. And that article begins, FBI investigators discovered an additional classified document and removed 6 other pages of records from the residence of former Vice President Mike Pence after a 5-hour unrestricted search of his home, a Pence spokesman said. Quote, the Vice President has directed his legal team to continue its cooperation with appropriate authorities and to be fully transparent through the conclusion of this matter, close quote, said the spokesman Devin O'Malley. The FBI arrived at Pence's home Friday morning for the consensual search. Please put a pin in that word, consensual. According to a police officer who blocked traffic on the suburban Indianapolis street. The search, which was voluntarily arranged, pin number 2 in the word voluntarily, by Pence with the Justice Department, had been expected for weeks. A Justice Department official who spoke on the condition of anonymity confirmed late Friday morning that the FBI was conducting a consent-based search. There's our third pin in the term consent-based search. So friends, 3 times in one paragraph, the author of that Politico article made it clear, wanted to convey to the reader appropriately, that this search of Mike Pence's home was consensual. It was voluntary. It was consent-based. Mike Pence is fully cooperating with the federal law enforcement authorities, just as all the reporting has indicated that Joe Biden is cooperating fully with all of the appropriate law enforcement authorities. What message are these 2 public servants, one former public servant, one current public servant and former Vice President Joe Biden, what message are they sending? Well, the message they are sending is, if I have stuff that I shouldn't have, stuff that belongs at the National Archives, but I brought it with me for better or worse, intentionally or unintentionally, when I left government service, I want it to go back to the federal government, to the National Archives, because that's the right thing to do. Friends, here's the reality of the situation. When people leave federal service, when people leave any employment, sometimes they take stuff with them that they probably shouldn't take. Isn't that kind of a common occurrence in our common experience? And if you find that you have some stuff you shouldn't have because it rightfully belongs to your employer, you should give it back voluntarily, without a fight. You shouldn't hide it. You shouldn't unlawfully retain it. And it's not that surprising that former federal employees, former high government officials ended up, packing up or having packed up for them stuff that they shouldn't have taken because it belonged at the National Archives. I'm not excusing it. I'm not downplaying it. I'm not suggesting that you should turn a blind eye to it. But not all possession of government stuff that you shouldn't have is the same, and it's certainly not all criminal. So let's look at the differences here, and then let's see what we can glean with respect to what these searches of Mike Pence's home and Joe Biden's home mean for the prospects of criminal indictments for Donald Trump for the crimes he inarguably committed, and we're going to talk about why that is in a minute. So friends, for this discussion, we have to go to a Team Justice Law School class just for a couple of minutes and talk about the Fourth Amendment, because not all searches are created equal. We all have a right against unreasonable searches and seizures, unreasonable searches of our homes, of our stuff. Precisely, the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. I love that. Shall not be violated. So how is it that the police, the FBI, DOJ, law enforcement authorities get to search our homes? Well, in one of two ways, predominantly. There's a public safety exception and some others, but predominantly, law enforcement gets to search our homes in one of two ways. Either they get consent because we give them consent voluntarily. We often do that when we know we have nothing to hide. Come on in and search, please. There might be some stuff here that I have that I shouldn't have that got packed up mistakenly and I want it to go to the rightful owner. I give you consent to come in and do a full sweep, a full search of my property, my stuff. Or the other way law enforcement gets to search our home is if a federal judge or a state judge, local judge, but in this case, if a federal judge reviews evidence that has been developed, that has been amassed during the course of an investigation, and that judge concludes that one or more crimes have been committed, and two, evidence of those crimes is likely to be found in a particular place. Let's not lose sight of the fact that no judge has ever issued a search warrant for Joe Biden's property or for Mike Pence's property. Those were voluntary searches. They were trying to do the right thing. But a judge did conclude that there were not one, not two, but three crimes committed inferentially by Donald Trump, and that evidence of those crimes would be found at Mar-a-Lago, and indeed, evidence of those crimes was found at Mar-a-Lago, specifically, among other places, in Donald Trump's desk drawers, in his personal office. And how did the Department of Justice get to the point where they had to go to a federal judge and show the judge evidence that proved, that made out the evidentiary standard of probable cause to believe that crimes had been committed and evidence of crime, those crimes would be at Mar-a-Lago? Well, first of all, the National Archives went to Mar-a-Lago and begged and pleaded with Donald Trump, please give us the documents back that we know you have, and Donald Trump refused to give them all back. And then DOJ officials, federal prosecutors and FBI agents went down to Mar-a-Lago and said, return the documents, and Donald Trump wouldn't. And then a federal grand jury investigating documents crimes issued a subpoena, which is a court order directing that those documents be returned specifically to the grand jury now as part of a criminal probe, and Donald Trump refused. So all that was left was for the Department of Justice, the federal prosecutors, the FBI, to go to a federal judge, present the evidence that they had developed during the investigation showing that Donald Trump committed crimes and that evidence of those crimes was likely to be found in a particular place, that being Mar-a-Lago, and the judge agreed there was probable cause and issued a search warrant. And when that search warrant was executed, in other words, when the FBI agents searched Mar-a-Lago, they found evidence of Donald Trump's crimes. That brings us to the question: does the search of Mike Pence's home that we just learned about, does the search of Joe Biden's home that we have known about now for some time, and does the fact that some documents were found during those voluntary consensual searches, does that impact the likelihood that Donald Trump will or will not be prosecuted for his crimes? Because he committed crimes. That can be argued a number of ways. You know, I think one way it can be argued is that, listen, Jack Smith has his head down and he's moving full steam ahead investigating the insurrection crimes of Donald Trump and the Mar-a-Lago documents crimes of Donald Trump. And he will be unencumbered and unaffected by whatever's going on with respect to Mike Pence and Joe Biden. Those cases, those instances, those circumstances have nothing to do with whether or not Donald Trump should be indicted for his crimes. That's one view. And I think that is primarily how Jack Smith is likely to proceed. It's how I proceeded when I was a prosecutor for 3 decades. I tried to tune out everything else and focus on the evidence in my case and whether it supported bringing an indictment, and if it did, was an indictment the right thing to do under the circumstances. Now let me back up and say we do have to be consistent as prosecutors as best we can, right? We need to make sure we treat similarly situated people and cases similarly, but generally, we remain focused on the evidence in the case we're investigating, and we tune everything else out. Here's another view of the impact that these searches might have on Donald Trump's crimes and whether they'll be prosecuted or not. If we didn't know anything about Mike Pence or Joe Biden having documents they shouldn't have, if we didn't know anything about these consensual searches of their homes, we might just look at the Donald Trump circumstance in isolation and say, well, what was Donald Trump to do? I mean, maybe he thought that these documents were his and, maybe he shouldn't be criminally charged for this. Here's the thing. We have concrete answers to questions like, what should Donald Trump have done? We know what Donald Trump should have done because it's what Joe Biden and Mike Pence did. When it was determined that they had some documents that they brought with them from their government service that they shouldn't have, that should go back to the National Archives, they did what good public servants and former public servants do. They said, we need to return these, and we're inviting you in to look at everything just to make sure we don't have anything else we shouldn't have. So I actually think we can answer the question, what was Donald Trump to do? Well, how about what Joe Biden and Mike Pence did? Voluntarily give everything back and invite the Department of Justice in to double check to make sure everything has been given back. That, quite frankly, is a pretty strong indication that neither Joe Biden nor Mike Pence had any criminal intent. Indeed, they probably didn't necessarily even engage in a criminal act. But of course, you need a criminal act and criminal intent to successfully prosecute someone. And everything that Biden and Pence have done suggests they had no criminal intent. And that's probably because they didn't commit a criminal act. Donald Trump committed a criminal act, and he reinforced his criminal intent at every move. So I will land on an answer to the question that I posed at the beginning of this video. What are the odds now? Have they increased or decreased that Donald Trump will be prosecuted? I think they've ticked up a little. Maybe not much, but I think they've ticked up a little. You know why? Because justice matters. Friends, thank you for sticking with me through that long, rambling, at times ugly explanation I hope it helped. I'm sure we'll be circling back to this topic sometime in the near future, because tomorrow's another day and we'll probably hear about another search of some other government official or former government official's home, and maybe we'll even hear about more classified documents being found. As always, friends, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again soon.